2 years ago, the Detroit Lions drafted Hendon Hooker, and some people thought that maybe further on down the road he might take over and become the face of the franchise. But now there are conversations being had by people outside of the organization that he might be trade bait. We're going to talk about it, so stay tuned.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5 end zone touchdown Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. Folks, I know that I'm pushing out a lot of content today, but again, I'm seeing stuff, I'm reacting to stuff, I'm giving you guys my thoughts, my opinions on it. And this is something that I saw, and even though this is a conversation that probably has been had somewhere else, here's what I'm going to say about it. I know that there have been thoughts raised by other people about whether or not the Lions should entertain the notion, the idea of trading quarterback Hendon Hooker to potentially get draft capital, to potentially add more draft picks, to potentially, maybe move up in the draft, get more, rotational pieces, whatever have you. But I saw an article that was a couple of days old, and I saw it and I was like, you know what? This is a rather interesting concept. Now, what was the article about? Basically, what the article was about is that saying that Hendon Hooker is now a damaged product because of what the Lions have done with him. Now, personally, I don't think that's the case. But what I do find interesting is that when you take a look at what Hendon Hooker is for the Lions, Hendon Hooker has become exactly what I said he was going to be when he got drafted by the Lions 2 years ago. He's a bench warmer. He is merely there to develop and be a solid backup quarterback for Jared Goff. I said it a whole hell of a long time ago. There was never a chance that Hendon Hooker was ever going to be the starting quarterback for the Detroit Lions. Number one, he was too old. Number two, he was coming into a professional system, whereas when he was out in Tennessee, he was running a spread offense, which is completely different. And then on top of that, number three, much like how Jameson Williams had, he was coming in and he was going to be operating on a very, very, delayed start because of the injury he sustained. And at his age, that already put him at a severe disadvantage. But my God, you want to hear about how many people said I didn't know what the hell I was talking about, wanted to say that I was just, against Hendon Hooker, I was just a Jared Goff fanatic, which I will admit I am a Goff fan, but I also base my thought process in reality. There was no way Hendon Hooker was ever going to take the reins away from Jared Goff unless Goff had an absolute, nuclear meltdown. Which, if we take a look at the freaking stats, Goff has been the exact opposite. Again, you take a look at Goff's production since 2022, he has been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, if I recall correctly, I think he's like top 5 in virtually almost every single statistical category. I know he's top 10 for certain. But there's no way the Lions were ever going to replace Goff with Hendon Hooker when Hendon Hooker was coming out of college in a different system. It wasn't a professional system. He was already a year behind because of his injury. And on top of that, at 26 going on I think he was 25 going on 26 or 26 going on 27, one or the other. He was coming in extremely late to the party. But that does not mean that the Lions have damaged him. I remember reading the article where I saw this, and the thought process was that, because Hendon Hooker didn't go in for Jared Goff after he had that nasty hit in the Washington Commanders playoff game, that somehow that sent the message that, the Lions aren't confident in him. That to me is just absolutely an asinine thought process. The reason why is because why would you put in Hendon Hooker, who, again, has not seen the field a whole hell of a lot? It is a big playoff game, whereas Teddy Bridgewater is an experienced veteran. He knows the system. And on top of that, he has played in playoff games before. As far as I know, he has. Or if not playoff games, very high-profile regular season games. To me, it was more about, okay, you know what? Who's the better option right now? Is it Hendon Hooker or is it Teddy Bridgewater? It was Teddy Bridgewater. So for me, it's like, I don't think Hendon Hooker's damaged goods at all. I think he's still exactly what the Lions intended him to be. A good, solid backup to develop. And in this point now, I think that there is a very strong possibility that the Lions might actually consider trading him. Because we have to understand something here. It's not like the Lions don't have options in free agency if they were to want to go and get another quarterback. They've still got Teddy Bridgewater on the roster. Freaking the Raiders are releasing Gardner Minshew. There's going to be quarterback options if the Lions should decide to go that route. And it's not exactly a bad idea to trade a guy away like Hendon Hooker, where it's like, listen, as much as he might have physical talents that you know are very exciting, he doesn't have a future here as a starter. And I've said that since the beginning. So for me, it's like, yeah, you know what? You drafted him in the 3rd round. You could potentially trade away Hendon Hooker and get like a 4th or a 5th. And then we all know how Brad Holmes has worked with those types of picks. He's made some pretty good dough out of those picks, a.k.a. Amon-Ra St. Brown. So for me, it's like, if you decide to hang on to Hendon Hooker, no problem. You still got a very good, very, solid option at quarterback for a backup. And again, he's been with the team for 2 years. He should know the system. He's going to continue to develop and get better because, again, he's coming into his 3rd season. By now, he should be able to express a much better competence of not only running the offense, at least with the 2s or the 3s, depending upon how it shakes out in training camp when that comes around. But at the same time, his athletic ability and the ability to be a scout team quarterback, that's also good. But if the Lions decide to trade him, you're still getting some sort of value in return, and that value could go towards, adding stuff on the rest of the team. My whole point of the matter is this. With Hendon Hooker, again, I hate saying I told you so, but I told you so. Hendon Hooker was never, ever going to be anything of a serious noteworthiness for the Lions. Anybody that thought that was merely deluding themselves. And that's why I tried to get people to understand. I'm like, listen, you are not going to replace a guy like Goff, who quite literally has gotten the Lions to 2 straight division titles, has also gotten us a #1 overall playoff seed, the first time ever in our history, 3 straight winning seasons, was one of the finalists in MVP voting this year. And on top of that, Goff finished this previous year with virtually almost top 3 in all the statistics. Again, if I recall correctly, I think Goff finished 2nd in passing yards, passing completion percentage, pass average per throw, and passer rating. And that's out of like 7 categories. 4 out of 7 categories, he finished the 2nd best in the NFL. So it's like, yeah, unless freaking Goff has a nuclear meltdown or, he just gets injured and he can't come back, there was never any chance that Hendon Hooker was ever going to be more than a freaking clipboard holder. And I know that sounds rude. I know that sounds to be a bit, cold about the situation, but it's the truth. If Hendon Hooker truly was going to be somebody that was going to challenge somebody like Goff for a job, #1, the Lions would have never given Goff the contract they gave him. #2, we would have heard more conversation from training camp and in the preseason that there was an actual open quarterback competition, but we never heard that. At best, what we heard is that Hendon Hooker would compete with quarterbacks to potentially move up to the #2 spot. But when you bring in Teddy Bridgewater to be the veteran backup quarterback, so now Teddy can spend more time mentoring and developing Hendon Hooker, at that point then it was like, listen, this conversation's dead, done, and over with. When you put another guy in between the starter and yourself, you're not really going to see the field unless something drastic happens. And I don't see that happening. Goff has been one of the most reliable quarterbacks in terms of production. He's been one of the best quarterbacks in terms of production. And on top of that, the guy seldom, if ever, leaves the field. Like, the only time he leaves the field, typically, is at the end of games when we're up like, freaking 3 scores or something. Otherwise, that guy is always out there on the field. He's always, doing his job. So for me, it's like, listen, I've got nothing against Hendon Hooker. But if I was Brad Holmes, I would say this right now. It would not be at all surprising to me if Brad Holmes is at least considered the notion of, man, I know there are teams right now that could use a young quarterback that has some athleticism and has some upside. I wouldn't at all be surprised if Brad Holmes has at least considered the notion of potentially trading Hooker and getting something back in return, whether it's a 4th or a 5th round pick. Because that's not at all out of the realm of possibilities, especially with the types of teams that are quarterback needy right now. So for me, it's like, hey, you know what? There are potential options here. If it does happen, I'm not going to cry. If it doesn't happen, same thing. I'm also not going to cry. That is where I have come to when it comes to this idea of what Brad Holmes is doing. Brad Holmes has done more than enough to earn my trust to where it's like, listen, unless it is something super egregiously unlogical, or he starts making multiple mistakes in a row and it's like, okay, there's clearly a problem here, I have nothing but utmost trust for what potentially Brad Holmes is going to do because he's earned it. Brad Holmes, in the literal span of 4 years, has helped build this team from a dumpster fire into a shining beacon of fire that is now one of the best of the NFL. That deserves credit and that deserves recognition and trust from the fan base. So, again, I'm just saying. But again, I just wanted to make this quick episode because, again, I saw it. I wanted to give my thoughts on it. I know it's probably not going to be a popular thought to some people, but again, the facts are the facts. If you don't like them, that's fine. But it doesn't change what the reality of the situation is that more and more people are starting to talk about this as being a legitimate idea. But having said that, I'm going to end this episode and say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. Also encourage y'all to do one of these 3 things: like, comment, and subscribe. If by chance you subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, I want to highly encourage y'all, please make sure you hit that bell notification icon so that way you never miss any more content that I push out. Also encourage y'all to share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you possibly can, so that way the channel can continue to grow and spread. And with that, I hope everybody got something out of it. I hope you all enjoyed it. I know some people probably won't, but whether it's the first time you're watching me or you guys have been watching me forever and a day, I hope you truly did get something out of it. Also hope that everybody out there has got something in their life that makes them happy, makes them smile. God bless, my friends, and until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.